Hello, it's August 28th, 2022. It's the Vlog 5, which is the part 2 of the morality of AI. 2 weeks ago, I said I was going to be talking about law enforcement, but when I was writing up my notes for that discussion, did a little bit more thinking, more talking to some other people, and didn't get around to actually making the video. But it's probably better that way because I think we really need to start with the surveillance state, because at the end of the day, that's going to be probably the most powerful tool that law enforcement would have. And before you pull out the pitchforks and start saying that shouldn't be, I'll get into that discussion in a second. But first, if you like the channel, please like, subscribe, comment down below. I checked the videos recently, still no views or comments, that's fine. But the moment I start seeing comments, I'll start responding to them and maybe even answering a few questions. Feel free whenever you want to. I'll probably check the last 2 weeks every single week before I do a vlog, after I do a vlog. In any case, so this is thought experiment time. Let's assume for a moment that there was an AI that was 100% omniscient, where it would know the location of everyone at all times, just carte blanche. Now, obviously, this would never happen because you can't have 100% uptime like that, but it's more of a thought experiment. So just go with that assumption for a moment. Now, some people are thinking that could never happen, or we should try to stop it from happening. But we already have stuff that's kind of getting close to that already. Not in the form of AI, but at least in the form of data gathering. So, for example, in China right now, there is so much surveillance of the populace and so much censorship and other such things. I'm not going to get into details because I don't want this term political. That we're literally seeing them using video surveillance with facial recognition to enact different rules for people based upon their loyalty. I think that's going a little bit too far, from my personal opinion. Some people in the U.S. might think, on the complete other side of the coin there, that might not happen here. But the Patriot Act literally was the government taking mass surveillance of all phone records for counterterrorism reasons, as they justified it for. So whether you think it or not, this kind of surveillance state is going to happen in some form or fashion. It may not be as 100% like the example or the experiment I'm presenting here, but it's going to happen in some form or fashion, whether you like it or not. So instead of trying to say, let's stop it from happening no matter what, how about we define rules around it that makes it so it keeps it in check, where if a government power or authoritarian power tries to abuse that surveillance ability, that it'll be very transparent to see that it would be happening, and the people could basically tell them, no, we won't accept this. So let's define what that reasonable balance and check is. So first off, this hypothetical AI that knows everything about everyone, it has to be publicly owned. It can't be owned by the state. It can't be owned by a corporation. It needs to be something that's, it could be funded by taxpayers, but it has to be its own entity entirely. Because if it holds any political views or any, intentions aside from, its intended purpose, which is to provide information when it's best needed, then it's not going to, be true to its form in that sense. So its incentives have to be pure in that regard. So it has to be completely separate from the government if at all possible in every way it can be. Now, how law enforcement would be able to use this? First question is, what is law enforcement there for? I think idealistically it's there to protect people from other people. So if someone is attacking you or breaking into your house or doing something that's, illegal and harming someone, then they should be there to prevent that action from happening, or at least to find the person that did those actions, to then bring them to justice. I know there's a lot of argument saying that's not the way it is. Absolutely. But I'm talking about an idealistic form of what the police should be. So helping them solve crimes in that sense would be a boon for them. Because if they need information on, say, someone broke into a house and, they left some victims inside the house, then it might be a good idea if that AI knows who did it. They could tell them that who did it. However, that could easily be abused because the police could start looking up anyone for any reason, and that's not good. So where is that line? How do we make that line happen? Well, first thing is first. The AI itself shouldn't be judging humans for criminal actions. So the fact is, humans should govern humans. The AI should be informational only. So it shouldn't say, oh, look, you're speeding, therefore I'm going to send you a ticket without even knowing without even notifying anyone. Those kind of actions, and not just AI, but any, system itself, because, automatic events like that it can be overwhelming very quickly. And I think it should be better left to humans to judge other humans, not the AI system itself. Transparency. So one way you can make these kind of checks and balances is by being transparent. Now, how could you make a system like this transparent? Well, you could make it so every single inquiry from law enforcement to this system would be publicly visible. Now, what do I mean by that? The actual inquiry itself, let's give an example here. Let's say someone did break into a house, and the law enforcement could say, who broke into go through the records of this particular one night, and figure out who broke into that house. Tell us the person who traveled to that location and did that action. Now, to the public, they'll see that someone inspected the house or that timeline to figure out if anyone entered that location during that time. It won't say who did it. That would be the information that they'd be getting. But the actual public information would say that inquiry happened. So, for the sake of privacy, any inquiries to whoever did the deeds or whoever inquiries are doing, whether it be on location or suspect, would be obfuscated for at least the identity of the individuals to a public sense. But to the law enforcement, they get the idea of the person if it knew it. If anything, maybe get some demographic information. But those results would be only for the law enforcement, of course. Now, if you were in law enforcement, how could you get around this? Is the first question I would ask. Well, pretty much what the Patriot Act did, which was allow bulk data gathering. So these requests, these inquiries to this AI should only be for a unique individual or a single location, and only under a set timeline. And all those parameters should be enforced. So it can't say, give me every person who did speeding on this road during this day. That's not a valid inquiry at that point. It had to be something very specific. And this is to make it so it's difficult to get bulk data in that sense. Of course, you still could if you just made inquiry after inquiry after inquiry. But because those inquiries are visible, people could see that they're making thousands upon thousands of inquiries a day and then start asking questions. So it kind of governs itself at that point if someone tries to do that. So let's say you are one of the people that they inquire about. I think you as an individual should know that they inquired about you personally. Now, for the sake of making sure that criminals are not tipped off, actual legitimate criminals are not tipped off, this could have a delay, like say a week, but the idea is that you as a person know if you are being investigated. And so by the time they're actually inquiring your information, they should already have a case already built up by that point. So this way, it's going to be not a fishing exercise, let's call it, because that can happen. In fact, one thing that some not so savory law enforcement do is if they want to stop you because they think you have a warrant on you or something along those lines, they'll follow you and they'll just wait for you to do some minor infraction and then stop you. That shouldn't be what this system is for. It should be for when there is a legitimate concern and you need information to prove or disprove that concern. Now, let's say you wanted to work with the police in this regard. You can always look up your own information. So if you know you are not at a scene of a crime and they come to ask you questions without actually going to the system first, and they say, where were you yesterday? You can actually pull up your information and show it to them, and they know it's true. Because if that system is outside of your control and outside of their control, it's effectively a third party at that point verifying your location, which allows you to easily prove your innocence in those situations as well without invading your privacy, because you're the one giving up that information, not them taking it. So that would be part of the system as well, where you can, as an individual, look up your own information. And on top of this, if if you want to grant access for, say, a loved one or for your own kids or something, you can actually have personal access granted to someone else so they can look your information up if they want to. All these are options when it comes to this information. It's kind of like the way Google does it right now, where you can share your location with your significant others. My wife does it to me all the time when she's traveling or when I'm traveling. So that I think would be acceptable because it's all by consent at that point. The only other thing really left is what happens when you die. Who gets your information, your historical information? It'd probably be best to go to next of kin. In some cases, this may not be the best approach for some people, but it is the most logical. Now, if there is no next of kin, or if there is no a known next of kin, it could go to the state at that point. So let's say there's someone who was found murdered, let's say, and they have no idea who it is. The system does say, well, this person's identified as this, and if they had no next of kin, it would just go to the state so they could figure out what's going on. If they did have next of kin, it would be given to the next of kin, and then they could release that information to the police instead to find out what happened. That's different examples of how this could work. So let me go through all of them again in more quick succession as defined rules. Rule 1, humans need to govern humans. It shouldn't be doing any kind of citations, any kind of judgments on anyone based on actions. It's purely for informational lookup. Rule 2, everything the authorities request to the AI would be 100% visible after a set amount of time, and that time being a defined set of time, like a week. Rule 3, all inquiries have to be for a single individual or a single location. And this is to prevent bulk data collection by its very nature. Rule 4, all inquiries have to be over a set of time. So you can't just say, give me everything from John Doe from his entire history of his life. It has to be, a set window. That window could easily be defined by, a time span of when the crime happened, if they're looking for a crime, or it could be over a longer period of time. But the time itself is also inscribed to that inquiry. So people know if the police are abusing them by looking up for more than necessary. Rule 5. If at any time you want to make your inquiries visible, you can. So if you think there is malfeasance on the authorities' part and you want to make that a public thing and not just a claim, you can make your search inquiries public. So this allows people to prove that they're misbehaving, that the authorities are misbehaving. Rule 6, you can always look up your information, and you can always give that information to anyone you want. Of course, that information, that inquiry that you made to yourself would also be visible to you, so you know if that happened or not. Rule 7, you can grant access to your information to anyone you want. So if you say, for your loved ones, for example, if you have a kid, you can have them give you their information, the access to their information, so you can always know where they are. On the death of a person, Rule 8, on death of a person, all their information goes to next of kin, and if not, then defaults to the state. So these may not be the perfect rules, or they may be modified or changed after more discussion. But I think this would be a good starting point, at least, for some kind of non-authoritarian way of granting access to the information that law enforcement needs, while at the same time protecting individual privacy. Because when there is a violent crime, it is better to get that case solved and those that actually did that crime to justice than to let it be an unsolved case. But at the same time, we can't let political-minded people use the system as a political fishing tactic. Just to say, give me everything for this person for the past 3 weeks, just to find something they did wrong so I can bring them in. That's not cool. Or in the case of if someone kidnaps a child, if the parent has access to the child's information, they know exactly where they are immediately, and then they can share that with the police immediately. So you could recover that child before something bad happens to them. But at the same time, we also don't want, the AI detecting every single speeding ticket that has happened every time it does, and then sending out tickets. It'd be very, very dangerous if something like that happened. So the fact is, it could be a powerful tool, but just like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. And these rules are hopefully trying to get it in the direction of using for good instead of bad. Of course, good and bad is relative, but that's a different discussion. But I think you're getting the idea of what I'm talking about here. In any case, next week, I'll try to make sure I get done. And then I'll go into other things that the law enforcement can use an AI for. Not so much the surveillance state part of it, but the actual physical tools they might be able to use. In any case, till then, be safe out there. See you next week.